I've been busy recording season two, but there is still so much stuff that I want to share in real time. So, if you've been following the podcast, you've probably noticed I've been uploading episodes here and there. And so today I wanted to share, what does following your intuition look like, feel like when you're scared? And when there's a lot of uncertainty and when it's kind of big stakes. So, I want to talk about my move to California. And so it started earlier this year. I was in meditation and I just had my intuition communicate to me. It just said, you should move to California. I mean, at that time, it was the day before I was looking at apartments in Washington, D.C. And I was just like, oh my God, like already for me to kind of, move into DC, I was like, okay, this seems like a lot already for me, and financially. And then for me to get the message of like, hey, you should move to California, I was like, oh my God, like this is even more expensive. And now I have a puppy, and like, wait, I have to move all my shit across the country. And at that time, vaccinations were not widely available. And so I was like, it's still COVID. People were still very, very cautious, not doing a lot of stuff. And so there was a lot of things. There was a lot of fear swirling around, a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty. But at this point, I knew, when I get like a very like straightforward, clear message from my intuition, and intuition for me and for most people will sound just very, clear, concise. It's a feeling, or it's a thought that kind of enters your consciousness. And I was like, okay, so I really need to listen to this, because when I haven't, just like shit goes crazy. Like a lot of like bad things start happening, not bad things, but just kind of like an unfortunate series of events. And I would imagine, if had I not gotten that message to like listen to that message to move, like, I don't know, something weird would have happened to like my apartment, or there would have been like a lot of construction happening, or like loud neighbors, or just something to kind of get me out of that situation and being like, you can't stay here. You need to go where you need to go. But luckily for me, I decided to, follow my intuition. And I was like, okay, this is like really scary. It took a couple days to kind of like sit with that feeling. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to see what I need to do to make this happen, because ultimately I, sat in meditation, I reflected, spent a lot of time outside, time with miso, very helpful for grounding, when you spend time with pets and animals in general. And I was like, I really would like this. If I, fear wasn't holding me back, like I would do it. And so I was like, okay, then let's just make it happen. It might not be as difficult as it seems. And so I'm really glad that I was able to do that. And I asked the universe, I was like, hey, I really need a sign. I need financial signs, like how will I find a place? And so a lot of things fell into place. Like a friend hadn't spoken to in a couple months, like messaged me the next day, and she lives in California. And I told her, I was like, oh my God, I was just thinking about you because I got this message to move to California. And she's like, oh, you can totally stay with me. No big deal. So I was like, okay, worst comes to worst. Like I have a free place to stay for, an indefinite period of time. And then another friend a week later was like, oh, you should look at the listings project to find a place. And I was like, oh, okay. And then that started like the process of me finding a place like pretty quickly, in a couple weeks time. And then of course it was the financial stuff. I was able to sign on a lot of clients during that period. And uh, I was like, I need the financial sign to make it okay for me to go, and that my business is going to be okay, like not being in the DC area. And before, a lot of times, like in this business, whether it's coaching or wellness, like people talk a lot about like 10K months. They talk about making 100,000 a year. It's because it's very easy to kind of like, it's like, like a catch, like a sales hook. But it's not always like fluid in terms of consistency of how much you make. And I wanted to kind of mention that as I talk about intuition, because it's very possible for you to make nothing and then make 10,000, or go from a couple $1,000s a month to making like 20 or 30. It's really all your energy and your belief system and your vibe. And so for me, like I was steadily making like at that point, I want to say like anywhere from like $3,000 to $5,000 like a month. I was still figuring out like my offerings, still the pandemic, and I wasn't like pushing like my sales and my programs like as much. But when I told the universe, I was like, I need a financial sign, like I completely skipped over 10K months. I went into a $26,000 month. Like, I kid you not. Like, that was the energy of California. That was the energy of me following my dreams, letting go of fear, letting go of anxiety, and being like, I'm doing this. Like, this is what I want. This is the reality I want to create myself, and I'm not going to hold myself back anymore. Because I think oftentimes, like, it's very easy for you to live in fear and to act small, to be small. And I used fear as a tool, and I was just like, okay, I need to make this happen. What is it going to look like? And just by aligning to that, like that energetic frequency, I welcomed a lot of new clients during that period. People who had listened to my podcast, people who had been following me for a long time. And then one person who's not even on social media, she went to this one workshop I did a year ago. And I remember doing a follow-up call with her, and she wanted to start a wellness business. And a year later, she's like, I'm ready. She's like, I remembered everything you told me. It was so incredible. And now I'm ready. And she made a huge investment to work with me. And I remember after that first initial call, I think like the summer before, so the summer of like 2020, yes. And taking that call, I was like kind of bummed that she didn't like sign up for me, but I was like, like what's meant for me is meant to me, and I can't really be hung up on those things. And then it came back around. So you never know like what seeds you're planting, the investments you're making in time and energy and community building, and what that will kind of result like in the future. So that's a reminder to always do things with intention and with integrity and in alignment with your values and your beliefs, because you don't know where they will lead you and kind of like what things will come into fruition and manifestation a couple months, a couple years down the line. Okay, so that's just my money manifestation, energetics kind of like tidbit, interjection in this episode about intuition and fear. Okay, so I then moved to the Bay Area for a couple months, didn't really work out, and I remember actually on the way there, I was in Salt Lake City. I had signed up for a reading with my good friend, Nikki Novo. And the night before, I did some prep work myself to meditate, because she prepares like right before. I don't know if she still does it like right before the call. She probably does. But I wanted to kind of like be in the right state of mind and energy. So I took some time to kind of bring my energy back to me and to really ground down. And something interesting that I saw during that meditation was me driving down Malibu. That was kind of like the visualization that came up as I thought about the year ahead. And I thought that was very interesting. And the message that I received was like, eventually I'm going to be in Los Angeles, but I need to be in the Bay Area to learn something, to do something, which definitely happened. And the next day when we got on our call, she also echoed the same sentiment. She's like, yeah, I saw you driving down like Malibu, like in Malibu, like really happy. And I was like, interesting, I guess like that's where we're gonna be. And she also was like, I also saw you being like really busy. Like, she's like, do you have a lot of friends there? And I was like, I do, like, yeah, in the Bay Area, but I have better friends in LA. And so it was very interesting to receive that information. And so when I got to the Bay Area, I had friends there, and, I met up with them, but it was nothing like what it's like in LA. In LA, it's almost like an automatic plug-in into multiple friend groups. But in the Bay Area, it's people that, I know that aren't really connected to one another, or they just have their own thing going. And of course, it was still very like early on, and like, the kind of, I don't want to say end of the pandemic, but kind of like the start of people getting vaccinated, and everyone was just going all over the place, traveling, seeing people they haven't seen in a while. And so I didn't really feel like I had a solid group of friends that I could see like every single month, or people I could like really reach out to. And also I was in kind of like not a remote place, but I was living by the beach, and it was 20-30 minutes to get into the city. And so it wasn't really easy to see people on a whim versus now, like I live in the city and it's very easy to bump into people. Like I just bumped into some friends yesterday. Friends came to my yoga class that I was subbing for. So all of those things were not available in San Francisco. And what San Francisco served for me was really just getting quiet, getting like acclimated to like a new frequency, getting a new routine with miso. Because when I got to California, it was still uncomfortable and uncertain with like our routine and how much I could trust him. I was like always worried that he'd run off. And so it definitely got better as I was living in the Bay Area, and we went for a lot of hikes. And so that trust really developed. And now I feel like we're in a much better place. I also developed, my career clarity readings, my psychic abilities. So I really attribute that time being really immersed in nature, like having the mountains and the ocean, like, right next to me in my backyard was really important. And toward the end of that experience and my time there, it was an activation and a realization that I need to be more vocal about certain things that I feel strongly about and my beliefs, and knowing when something doesn't feel right, even though the people are like, oh no, like this is, really well-meaning, and no, like we care a lot about people, we're empathetic, compassionate, like words and actions, especially actions, speak more. Like actions always, like they may say like whatever, but they may act a very different way. And so it was a very confusing time with me just because the people that I was living with, they would say one thing but act in a very different way. And it ended up being a very toxic place to live in because one of my roommates was, ended up being like, a narcissist and very disrespectful, mocked me, was very combative, was just downright rude when he felt like he wasn't in a safe place and when he wasn't getting what he needed. And I think when you are in a difficult situation, it really shows the true nature of what that person is like. Because I would never treat someone in that way. And for someone to kind of it was just not the ideal, way to like move out of place. I had to move out immediately. It was very toxic. The communication wasn't good. And, I do acknowledge my part in it too, because I kind of shut down because that person just really scared me in terms of the amount of like, emotional needs that they had, and what they wanted to be communicated was a lot more than I wanted to and was willing to, especially with the lack of rapport and trust that was in that relationship and between the two of us. And so I feel like there was a deterioration that happened also just because it was time for me to leave as well. I remember visiting Los Angeles in late July, early August, and I was like, oh, like I really like it here. I'm probably going to be visiting a lot more, and then I'll plan to move like spring of next year. I don't know why I had these like plans like for myself, kind of like these things set in stone, but that was kind of like the thought that I had, but the universe had other plans, like pushed me out like a lot earlier and was like, hey, you actually should move out a lot faster. You actually need to be at Los Angeles like a lot earlier than you think. And so that was, one of the things I remember when I was like, okay, I guess I'll just move to Los Angeles. I don't want to find another place in like San Francisco, was I remembered like that visualization that I had in meditation and what my friend Nikki had told me in May of like, going down to Malibu. And I was like, well, like this is like really where I want to be anyways. And so things happened very easily, very quickly. I was able to stay with relatives, and I stayed with my good friends Shannon and Steve the first like month in California, and I found my place actually that first weekend. So this is, kind of like part three of intuition. The first part was moving to California. The second part was very interesting, kind of like a premonition of like, where I was really going to be living. And then the third part was like how I found my apartment. I was pretty worried and anxious about like finding the right place. It's super competitive, one beds with certain requirements. And so I was like, okay, I really need to get on this. I saw 20 places. Because I wanted to be sure. There were 2 days I saw 8 places on each day. So it was very much so like a whirlwind. But I remember I saw my current place that weekend that I arrived in LA. It was number 9 out of 20. And I walked in and my intuition, my body was just like, this is home. This feels really good. But then, it's never a sure thing until, they approve your application and you sign the contract and all of that. And so I wanted to be sure. I was like, okay, this is what I really, really want. I'm pretty sure this is the place that I want to live in and I will live in. But let's see all these other places just in case. And so I saw an additional 11 places after that. But I just really followed the energy of like ease, and it was easy to kind of stay with my friends and find places. And it was easy overall, the application process for this place. But most importantly, it felt like home. I really followed my intuition. Like there were places that were a lot cheaper and that were like closer to the beach. But I was like, it doesn't really feel like home. And so practicing listening to your feelings, what your body is telling you, is a big part of intuition. And that's kind of how I found like my home. And I remember being like, ooh, it's kind of like a little bit more than I'd like to pay, but it has everything that I wanted. And then right when I like signed the contract a couple days later, they're like, we're really sorry, but there was some miscommunication. There actually isn't a garage spot, but we're willing to reduce the rent by $100 a month. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's great, because I was actually concerned about how I'd get Miso into the car when we were in the garage, because it was so small, the space, I could barely fit into it. And so I ended up working out really well. So those are a couple like recent examples of intuition that I've really experienced, especially dealing with like home. And I know that home and moving can be a very tough thing, as many of you are looking to move to new places, whether it's in the same city or a new city or a new country. And I really invite you to just listen to your body, make space mentally, emotionally, for you to be able to find some quiet time to really tune in to what's going to feel the most nourishing for you, like what really lights you up. And I remember when I was looking at those places in DC, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be paying so much to be here. Like, I don't want to live here. Like, or, I don't feel excited. And so that's not where the energy needs to be. You have to feel excited. You can feel a little bit nervous, but you have to be like, oh, I'm pretty excited for this. This feels like home. This feels like where I can put down roots, whatever, the reasoning can be for you. So those are some stories I have about intuition and working through fear. And then one of the last messages I have around intuition is like for myself, like in December and even November, like I wrote this down like a year ago when I would do my annual reflections and kind of plan ahead for the year ahead. I got the message for November, December to not work as much and to really cultivate my energy and to do more things out of service than kind of like actively selling. And I didn't really listen to myself that well for November, but in December I will. But I see it really reflected, like, in the signups that I get for certain things, like my soul isn't in it, or it's just not the right energy for myself. And I'm really being called to go inward once more. And so that's what I'll be doing. And so there'll be some fun freebies, some fun ways to connect with me, in December and in January, things to really cultivate your energy, to practice your intuition, to help you navigate your Saturn return, all these fun things. So stay tuned. Follow me on Instagram, text me on my hotline 202-918-3414, join my newsletter to really keep up to date on all the things I will be introducing to you, those in my community. I'm super excited. And also season 2, which is all about Saturn return and how spirituality helps with your career and also creating a business, is coming up I think I'm going to have it in mid to late January as a launch. I'm just wrapping interviews up now. I have to record all the other, intros and outros and some solo episodes and some sound baths for you guys. But it's getting to a good place. And so that's all I have for you today. And as always, I'm here to support you if you want to do a one-on-one career clarity reading. And I have these very special mini sessions for December. So if you feel called for a mini session, I'll answer your questions through card pulls and also tell you your astrology for abundance, your abundance astrology. So how you can make money easily, how you can call in more abundance in your life. So those are the things that I'm sharing with you guys for this next upcoming month. And then I have those wellness sessions to help you create your offering. It's like a 90-minute accelerator boot camp where we'll figure out what you need to do to create a magical offering to introduce people to people in the new year. So those are the 3 things that I'm doing. And so if you feel called to it, let me know. You know how to find me. Text me, DM me, email me. All right. Have a wonderful day, everyone.